Hi guys, I'm Chanaka and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to talk about how you can expose an existing SOAP service as a secured REST service through WSO2 API Manager. As you can see in this diagram, I have a SOAP service which is unprotected SOAP service called phone verify, and I have a REST client. So what I am going to do today is I am going to use the WSO2 API Manager 260 to convert this SOAP service and expose a REST service which is O2 protected through the WSO2 API Manager. Let's see how we can do it. So I have the WSO2 API Manager component running in my laptop as well as the API Manager Analytics. So let's go and log into the API Publisher, which is the main interface which we use to create APIs. So let's log into the API Publisher. It is in this URL, whatever the host name, 9443/publisher. So I am going to log in with the default username and password. Then here you can see what are the APIs you have already created. So in this case I am going to create a new API. So when I'm going to create a new API, there are a few options. So I can start with an existing REST API, or I can start with a SOAP endpoint, or I can design a new REST API from the scratch, or I can design a new WebSocket API. So in this case I have a SOAP endpoint and I am going to start with this option. So let's see my SOAP endpoint. So this is the SOAP endpoint I am going to use in this scenario. So this is a publicly accessible SOAP service which basically provides you some information about a phone number. So it has an operation called check phone number. When you give the phone number and a license key, it will provide you some information about the phone number. So this is the SOAP request which this service is expecting, and this is the response. So if I try out this scenario, let's say I have a phone number and license key. If I invoke this, it will provide me a SOAP response like this. So this is the SOAP service which I am going to use in this scenario. So let's go back to the API Publisher. So I am starting with, I have a SOAP endpoint option. So this I am going to give the WSDL URL of this SOAP service. So then I have two options. I can either create a pass-through REST API. In that case, the API Manager acts as a pass-through proxy. Basically, it will apply the security O2 security on top of the REST API which is exposed to the client, but it won't meddle with any of the incoming payload. So one of the disadvantage of this approach is you need to send the SOAP action and the payload in the XML format which is expected by the backend. So instead of using that option, I am going to generate a REST API which is like more RESTful nature. Since we are using the API Manager to create RESTful APIs, so this option gives us more REST friendly API development. Let's go and create the API. So I start creating, then you can provide the relevant information like the API name. Let me give a name called phone tutorial. Okay, so this is already there. Let me use phone demo. Then I'm going to use the same context. Then I need to give the version. So these are the mandatory parameters. Other information like tags you can either provide or you can skip. The description also. Alright, so here you can see the APIs are already generated from the WSDL in a RESTful manner. So if we click on this one of these resources, you can see it has created this check phone numbers resource. It has two parameters. One is the body, message body. Then the other parameter is the license key, which is a query parameter. So if we go to the next resource, which is the check phone number resource, it expects a phone number and a license key. So this is the operation we have observed here. It expects the phone number and license key. So this particular service has two operations, check phone number and check phone numbers. If I go to this list, here you can see these two operations. So in this case, let's go to the check phone number. So this is how it has generated for check phone number. Basically, it has converted these request payload parameters into query parameters. So that is some common pattern people use with the RESTful interfaces. So let's go and click the next tab. So in the next tab, you need to provide the endpoint. So in this scenario, since we are calling a SOAP endpoint, let's select this HTTP SOAP endpoint type and give the URL of this SOAP service. So this is the URL of the phone verify service. So here one of the important thing is, like, now we are exposing a RESTful service, and calling a backend SOAP service from the API Manager. So there should be something happening within the API Manager to make this conversion. So how we do that is using this SOAP to REST mapping. So here what we are doing actually is we are getting the query parameters and we are creating a payload out of that, which is the payload expected by the SOAP service. And also we are setting the SOAP action parameter, which is expected by the backend service. If you go to here, you can see this is the SOAP request, which is expected by this service. It has a SOAP action and a payload. So we are building this automatically within the API Manager. So the user has nothing to do with this. It is automatically generated. So then let's go and click on the Manage tab, where we can provide the tier information, and if you want some throttling, so these kind of things you can configure. So in this scenario, I am going to take the tier information, which is the only mandatory parameter. So here the security is already configured, O2 security. So that's all you have to do. Let's save and publish this API. Now this API is available in the store. Let's go to the store and see how we can consume this API. So first of all, I'll sign out from this store first. So this is the API store view for public users. If you don't have a user account with this API store, you will see what are the available APIs, but you cannot consume these APIs. To do that, you need to sign in. Let's sign in with the default username password, and the next thing you need to do is you need to subscribe to this API. So let's go and subscribe to this API. So this is the API we created, phone demo v1. So we have the phone demo v1 API here, and we need to subscribe with an application. So by default it comes with a default application. So I can select one of the tiers and click on subscribe. So now I have subscribed to this API. Let's go and see how I can execute this API with my subscription. So I have many different subscriptions. So this is the API we just created. It's the phone demo, so it should be somewhere in the next page. Yeah, this is the phone demo v1. So if I go into the API console, if you have already generated a token for this application, it will automatically populate into this interface. from this interface I can try out the API. So in this case what actually happens is, so I'm going to use the check phone number operation. So it will send a curl request to the API from this web application. So let's go and try it out. So here you can see the query parameters which are expected from the REST API which we just created. And if I click on execute, it will call the REST API with the authorization token and give me a RESTful response, which is a JSON response. So this is the response I am getting from the API which is exposed through the API Manager. So this is the curl request which is sending to this API Manager. If I copy this here and if I use a curl command to execute this, so here in this scenario I have my terminal. So I am going to execute a curl command to the API Manager. So this is the API Manager interface or the API URL, so which will eventually call the backend web service and provide me the response. So this is my O2 token. Let's go and execute this and see what's coming in. So here you can see the response, which is the JSON response which is coming from the API Manager. So if I put a verbose flag here, curl -v, I can see additional information. Sorry, override. If I put curl -v here, so you can see it has the relevant response information, the content type, 200 OK response, and this is the response. So that's how you can create a REST API out of a SOAP service in the API Manager. If I show you the last information, which is the analytics part, so here you can see the phone demo API has received 3 requests. So those are the 3 requests we have sent from the curl command and from this interface. So that's all for today. If you have any questions, you can comment below, and thanks for tuning into my YouTube channel.